How to control your mind for success. There is a war inside you, not between good and evil, not between success and failure, but between two voices, the one that calls you higher and the one that tells you to sit down, the one that sees potential and the one that repeats old pain, the one that whispers, "Let's go," and the one that screams, "Who do you think you are?" And until you learn how to take control of your mind, you will continue to live by accident, building, breaking, rising, falling, according to the emotional weather of the day. You will think success is about willpower. You will think it is about motivation, but it is not. Success is about mental ownership, because your thoughts are not random, they are patterns. And those patterns are either creating a future that aligns with your vision or repeating a past that fits your fear. You are not just a product of your environment. You are a product of your mental environment. What you allow, what you entertain, what you dwell on when you are alone and the world goes quiet. And the truth is, no one taught you how to manage that world. You learned how to dress. You learned how to speak. You learned how to smile, how to fit in, how to push through. But no one taught you how to think with intention. No one taught you how to challenge your thoughts, how to interrupt the story, how to confront the voice in your head that sounds like you but was never really yours. So now you live with a mind that was built by fear, by survival, by repetition, not by truth. And that mind is driving the vehicle of your life. You may be ambitious, you may have big goals, but if the voice in your head is small, your life will shrink to match it. Because here is the law. You can only rise to the level of the thoughts you consistently believe, not the ones you say in public, not the ones you write in your journal once a month, the ones that run on autopilot when you are tired, discouraged, or alone. That is where your future is being decided, not in your effort, in your mental default. And if you do not control your mind will control you, and it will always choose what is safe, what is familiar, what is predictable. Even if it means sabotaging your growth, even if it means shrinking your dream, even if it means repeating the same cycle year after year. But there is a turning point. There is a moment when you wake up and realize, I am not my thoughts. I am the thinker. And if I am the thinker, I can choose. I can choose what stays. I can choose what goes. I can choose to no longer be a victim of my inner voice, but to become the author of it. That is the moment everything shifts. Because once you control the narrative inside, nothing outside can derail you. Not criticism, not comparison, not delay, not failure. Because you know where your power lives, not out there, but in here. This book is your training ground, not to fake positivity, not to memorize mantras, but to master the mechanics of your inner world. To become someone who does not just have goals, but who has the mind to match them. Because success does not come to the smartest, the loudest, or the most talented. It comes to the one who controls their focus, directs their energy, manages their state, and leads their thoughts instead of following them. That is who you are becoming now, not by accident, by decision, by discipline, by choosing to rise above your old mind and rebuild a new one that works for you, not against you. Because when you control your mind, you control your life. Chapter 1. Awareness. The beginning of mental power. Before you can change anything, you must see it. Before you can rewire a thought, you must recognize the pattern. Before you can master your mind, you must first meet it. Not the version you show others, but the real one that lives beneath your reactions, routines, and resistance. This is the first law of mental control. You cannot lead what you do not observe. Most people live on autopilot. They believe they are making decisions. But really, they are just repeating impulses from a mind that was never trained to pause. They wake up, reach for their phone scroll without thinking. They feel anxious, and instead of asking why, they distract. They feel fear, and instead of challenging it, they obey. Over time, this becomes identity. You are not just doing the same thing. You are becoming someone who no longer questions the script. And when that happens, life begins to shrink, possibility fades, vision dulls, and you live not from freedom but from programming. This is why awareness is your greatest wealth. It gives you back the one power you need to rewrite everything choice. The ability to step back and say, wait, who told me this thought was true? Who taught me to be afraid of this? Where did this story come from, and why have I allowed it to run my life without ever interrupting it? This moment of awareness is not always comfortable, because it means facing the truth that many of your thoughts are not your own. They are echoes of past wounds, echoes of culture, of upbringing, of failure, of voices that told you who you were before you even knew who you could become. But the gift is this: once you see it, you can shift it. You are not trapped in your first thought. You are only trapped if you believe it without question. The mind is fast. It likes efficiency. It will always choose the path of least resistance. That is why the same doubts rise when you try to do something new. That is why your body freezes before a leap. That is why you sabotage at the edge of a breakthrough, not because you are weak, but because your mind is working perfectly according to its programming. But now you are the observer, not just the participant. Now you are learning to see the space between stimulus and response. And in that space, that is where your success is built. When you become aware, you begin to interrupt. You say, no, I do not need to believe this just because it is loud. You say, no, I can choose a new thought even if the old one feels familiar. You say, no, I will not let this pattern play out again just because it is easy. This is what mental control looks like in the beginning, not total mastery, just moments of clarity. You catch yourself before you spiral. You pause before you react. You notice the fear, and instead of fleeing, you stay with it. Not to let it win, but to let it teach you, because every thought has a message. It is not here to punish you. It is here to reflect you, to show you where your beliefs are too small, to reveal where you are still living from fear, to illuminate the gap between who you are and who you are becoming. And when you bring awareness to that gap, you close it, one decision at a time. This is the beginning of control, not over the world, over you. Because when you become aware of your mind, you stop being ruled by it. You start to lead it. And when that happens, nothing outside of you has the power to dictate your day, your worth, your future. You do, from the inside out. Chapter 2. Beliefs. The silent architects of your life. There are thoughts, and then beneath the thoughts, there are beliefs. And it is those beliefs, not the words you say or the goals you write, that build your life. Beliefs are quiet. They do not scream. They do not announce themselves. They hide beneath logic, beneath emotion, beneath habit. You feel them more than you hear them. They shape how you interpret pain, how you see yourself in the mirror, how you respond to success, and how you prepare or fail to prepare for opportunity. They are not formed overnight. They are accumulated, handed down, collected from childhood moments, cultural rules, mistakes that cut too deep, and words spoken by people who had no idea how powerful their voices were inside your developing mind. And without even knowing it, you began to build your life around them. You do not ask for more because deep down you believe too much is dangerous. You do not speak boldly because deep down you believe silence is safer. You do not take the risk because somewhere you believe failure means identity collapse. You do not rest because you believe rest equals laziness, and you confuse exhaustion with worthiness. These are not just behaviors. They are belief loops, and unless you challenge them, they will run your life forever. This is why most people never change even when they desperately want to. They are trying to build a new future on the foundation of an old belief. They set new goals but carry the same limits. They start new relationships but bring the same wounds. They launch new ideas but are haunted by the same doubts, because the belief never shifted. And your belief, it will always override your ambition. Every single time. You can dream big, speak loud, and hustle hard. But if your inner blueprint says, this is not safe, this is not who I am, or this will not last, your mind will sabotage the success before it arrives. So the work, it is not about adding more, it is about removing what no longer belongs. It is about holding every belief up to the light and asking, is this mine? Did I choose this, or was I taught this by someone who did not believe in themselves either? Is this true now, or was it only true in a moment? I never healed from this is not easy, because some beliefs feel like home, even the ones that hurt, especially the ones that hurt. But if you want freedom, real, sustainable inner freedom, you must be willing to outgrow what once protected you. That belief that says stay small so you do not get judged, it helped you survive. Now it keeps you from rising. That belief that says be perfect so they cannot criticize you, it gave you control. Now it gives you anxiety. That belief that says keep people at a distance so you never get abandoned, it shielded your heart. Now it starves your connection. You see, your beliefs are not just ideas. They are agreements. And the most powerful thing you can do is break the ones that no longer serve the life you are building. But how you do it by introducing doubt, not toward your future, toward your old beliefs. You say, what if I was wrong about what I deserve? What if being visible is not dangerous? What if money is not evil? What if failure is not shame, but simply part of mastery? Because when you begin to doubt the belief, you loosen its grip. And once it loosens, you can replace it, not with hype, not with fake positivity, but with evidence. You begin to live a new pattern. You take the risk and survive. You speak up and are respected. You rest and realize the world did not fall apart. Each time your brain takes notes, each time your nervous system rewires, each time a new belief is born, not in theory, but in experience. And the more you repeat it, the stronger it becomes. Until one day, without fanfare or announcement, you realize I no longer believe what once held me hostage. I no longer obey fear. I no longer wait for permission to be the person I have already decided to become. That is the power of controlling your mind. You stop editing your life to fit an outdated narrative. You begin to build a future that reflects who you really are, not who your old beliefs taught you to be. And when you do, success becomes natural, not because you forced it, but because you finally believed you were built for it. Chapter 3. Conscious thinking train the mind before it trains you. Your mind is not loyal to your goals. It is loyal to your patterns. And unless you begin to lead it consciously, it will default to the path of least resistance, the familiar, the automatic, the emotional, the easy. This is why most people think the same thoughts every single day. They do not choose their thoughts, they inherit them. From yesterday's habits, from last week's fear, from last decade's pain. And then they wonder why nothing in their outer world changes. But how could it? If your internal world is still operating on yesterday's software, this is why learning to think consciously is the cornerstone of success. Not reactively, not emotionally, but deliberately. You must wake up each day and say, today I will manage my mind before it manages me. You must treat your thoughts like a room you walk into. If it is messy, you do not panic. You clean it. You do not judge the mess. You organize it. You decide what stays and what goes. This is the discipline of conscious thought. And like any discipline, it requires practice. You do not get better at thinking by thinking more. You get better by thinking clearly. You pause. You observe. You catch yourself mid-reaction and say, wait, is this true? You feel the panic and ask, is this my old pattern or real danger? You hear the inner critic and answer, thank you for your opinion, but I am choosing a different story today. This is how you regain power. Not through external control, through internal clarity, Because the truth is, your mind is a tool. It is meant to work for you, not against you. But left untrained, it becomes a weapon, one that turns on its owner, slicing through confidence, cutting down opportunity, destroying progress before it begins. $1,000,000 ideas die every day in the minds of people who never learn to interrupt their first thought. And the cost is not just financial, it is emotional. It is the cost of dreams delayed, of joy postponed, of potential wasted. But once you learn to slow the thought, you begin to see the illusion. Most of what your mind fears is not real. Most of what it resists is not dangerous. Most of what it rehearses is based on a past that no longer applies to the present. And when you realize that, you become dangerous, not to others, to limitation, to the narratives that used to run your life, to the excuses you once lived inside. Because now you are thinking on purpose. You do not let your mind decide how you feel. You instruct it. You direct it. You speak into it with clarity, with command, with ownership. That does not mean every thought is positive. It means every thought is filtered. It means you choose what gets planted and what gets pulled. It means you stop arguing with old fear and start feeding new focus. You stop reacting and start responding not to the world, but to the world inside you. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. You begin to feel a gap between the emotion and the action. You begin to hold yourself steady when chaos rises. You begin to navigate rejection, doubt, uncertainty, not by spiraling, but by remembering who is in charge. And it is not your fear. It is not your past. It is not your old identity. It is you, not the impulsive you, the conscious you, the one who now leads the mind instead of following it. That is mastery. That is power. And from that place, your entire life begins to mirror your intentional inner state. Chapter 4. Mental Discipline, Choosing the Future Over the Feeling. If your mind is the steering wheel, then discipline is the grip. Without it, you drift. You get pulled by emotion, fatigue, rejection, fear. You follow the wind of mood and wonder why your results feel like a storm. But when you take control with mental discipline, everything sharpens. You stop living by how you feel. You start living by what you've decided, and that shift is the birth of unshakable focus. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think it is pressure, punishment, perfection. But discipline is devotion to what matters most, even when it is hard, even when no one is clapping, even when your old mind begs for distraction. Discipline says, I show up anyway. I keep going anyway. I choose growth over comfort again and again. Because here is the truth. You will not always feel inspired. You will not always feel ready. You will not always feel clear. But if you only move when your emotions agree, you will live in cycles. You will rise, crash, reset. You will start, stop, repeat. You will dream big and shrink back the moment pressure shows up. But mental discipline breaks the loop. It replaces reactivity with rhythm. It replaces excuses with action. It replaces panic with presence. Discipline does not silence emotion. It overrides it. It says, I hear you fear, but I am moving anyway. I feel you doubt, but I do not obey anymore. I see the past rising, but I am no longer its servant. This is what makes the successful different. Not that they feel less, not that they are stronger, but that they refuse to serve a feeling at the cost of their future. They act from the standard they've set, not from the state they are in. And that action, it becomes identity. You begin to believe in yourself, not because life is perfect, but because you are consistent. You begin to trust yourself, not because you always win, but because you always return. Discipline is not about force. It is about memory. It is remembering who you are, why you started, what you promised yourself, and holding that promise even when it would be easier to let go. Because your success does not belong to the motivated version of you. It belongs to the version of you who stays when it is boring, who writes when they do not feel like it, who trains when no one is watching, who shows up when there is no applause. That version, she is unstoppable, not loud, not flashy, just immovable in her commitment to the vision. And that commitment is what bends reality, because the world begins to move for the one who refuses to move away from her truth. But you must choose it not once, not occasionally, but daily. Every time your mind says, let's quit, you say, we are not available for that anymore. Every time your body says, let's rest forever, you say, we rest for strength, not escape. Every time your emotions say, this is too hard, you say, yes, and we are doing it anyway. This is not cruelty, this is care. Because when you lead your mind, you stop abandoning the life you were born to build, just because it asked for more than your comfort zone could offer. So make the vow, I do not need to feel like it to follow through. I do not need the mood to match the mission. I do not need ease to stay committed, because I am no longer ruled by my feelings. I am ruled by my focus. And that focus, it creates everything. Chapter 5. Guard your mind like a gate, because everything enters. You are not tired because of how much you do. You are tired because of how much you think and how little of it is truly yours. Every day your mind is bombarded. Voices from screens, opinions from people you do not even know, conversations that drain, content that distracts. And without realizing it, your mental energy, your most powerful currency, is leaking. Not through failure, but through noise. This is why control is not just about creating the right thoughts. It is about guarding the space where those thoughts are born. You cannot plant greatness in polluted soil. You cannot build a calm mind in a chaotic world without filters. You cannot hear your true voice if you are constantly tuned in to everyone else's. That is why mental mastery requires boundaries, not just with people, but with inputs. Because every input becomes a seed. And the question is, what are you growing? If you feed your mind fear, do not be surprised when it becomes anxious. If you feed your mind comparison, do not be shocked when you feel behind. If you feed your mind outrage, distraction, noise, do not wonder why clarity is gone. Your mental state is not mysterious. It is mirroring what you consume. And until you take responsibility for your attention, you will never fully take control of your power. This is where most people fall short. They do the inner work for an hour and then spend the rest of the day undoing it through unconscious exposure. They journal clarity and scroll chaos. They meditate in the morning and gossip by noon. They speak affirmations and then ingest opinions that contradict everything they are trying to build. And then they say, why is nothing changing? Because your inputs do not match your intention. To control your mind, you must curate your environment as intentionally as you curate your vision. Not to be closed, to be clear. You are not here to consume everything. You are here to protect the sacred space where your identity is being rewritten. That space is your mind. And it must become your temple. You decide who gets access. You decide which voices you allow on your mental stage. You decide which conversations are investments and which ones are withdrawals. This is not about being better than anyone. This is about becoming better than your old habits. It means saying, I do not engage in debates that cost me peace. I do not explain myself to people committed to misunderstanding. I do not consume content that makes me question my enoughness. I do not stay in rooms where my vision feels too big, because your future depends on the quality of your internal world, and the quality of your internal world depends on the strength of your mental gates. Yes, it is hard to say no. Yes, it is uncomfortable to unplug. Yes, it might feel isolating at first to remove yourself from what once felt normal. But what is normal to the world? Stress, confusion, reactiveness, distraction. That is not your standard anymore. You are building something rare, a mind that works for you. And that means being ruthless with what you allow to take root. Let this become your vow. If it does not feed my focus, it does not get in. If it does not align with who I am becoming, it gets no vote. If it drains my clarity, it loses access to my energy. Because I am no longer just managing my mind, I am guarding the source of my entire life. Chapter 6. Emotion is data, not direction. Most people think the enemy of success is failure, but it is not. The real enemy, emotional reactivity. It is the habit of letting how you feel in the moment determine what you do or fail to do, regardless of what you actually value. That is how dreams die silently, not in catastrophe, but in quiet moments when you obeyed your feelings instead of your future. You skipped the call, you delayed the launch, you avoided the challenge. You said no when your heart knew it should be yes, or worse. You said yes when everything inside you screamed no, not because you are weak, because no one taught you this truth. Emotion is not instruction. It is not your compass. It is not your authority. It is not your boss. Emotion is data. It is a signal, not a command. And when you begin to see emotion that way, everything changes. Fear rises, you do not run, you listen. Doubt appears, you do not shrink, you examine. Sadness visits you, do not numb. You breathe, observe, allow. This is the work of a powerful mind, not the suppression of emotion, but the leadership of it. To say, I see you, I feel you, I honor you, but I will not hand you the wheel, because your emotions are not lies, but they are not always truth either. They are responses to what your nervous system perceives. They are echoes of old pain, old trauma, old stories. They are sometimes distorted, sometimes accurate, always meaningful, but never meant to decide your destiny. And when you give emotions the power to lead, you turn your life into a reaction loop. You chase safety, not purpose. You seek comfort, not growth. You replay the past, not because you want it, but because it feels familiar. But those who control their minds, they do not make decisions from the feeling of the moment. They choose from the anchor of identity. They ask, who am I becoming, and what would that version of me do right now, regardless of how I feel? And then they act, even if their hands shake, even if the old fear rises, even if the emotion screams louder than logic, because now they know discomfort is not danger. It is a sign they are exiting the pattern. And exiting the pattern is always uncomfortable at first. But freedom lives on the other side. The freedom to show up anyway, to speak when you used to stay silent, to risk when you used to retreat, to follow through when you used to fall back. That freedom, it begins when you stop believing every emotion as gospel and start seeing it as a guest in your home, not the architect of it. So what does emotional leadership look like in practice? It looks like breathing before reacting, pausing before replying, letting go before lashing out, reflecting before retreating. It looks like feeling fully without letting the feeling hijack the moment. And with each act of leadership, you build trust, not just with others, with yourself, because you learn I can feel everything and still choose what serves me. That is power, that is maturity, that is mental mastery, not because you control every emotion, but because every emotion no longer controls you. Chapter 7. Focus is the currency of success. Your life moves in the direction of your dominant focus. Not your wishes, not your words, not even your hard work, unless that work is rooted in clarity. This is the secret that high performers, world changers, and those who build extraordinary lives all understand. Focus is not something you have. It is something you train. It is a discipline, a daily decision, because every day the world is pulling at your attention and your mind is choosing who to give it to. And the cost. It is not just time, it is power. When you are scattered, nothing deepens. When you are distracted, nothing completes. When your attention is fragmented, your identity becomes fragile. Because your focus is what shapes your thoughts, your emotions, your habits, your entire internal world. And the truth is, you cannot think clearly if you cannot hold focus. That is why people feel stuck. It is not always fear. It is not always failure. It is because they are too mentally divided to generate momentum. They are constantly switching tasks, shifting priorities, chasing noise, and calling it effort. But motion is not progress. Busy is not effective. And consuming is not creating. Focus is what draws the line. It says this is what matters now. Everything else waits. It does not mean you ignore life. It means you stop leaking your life into 1,000 directions. The ones who rise, they are not always more talented. They are more ruthless with their attention. They choose the mission over the moment. They choose depth over dopamine. They understand that real growth requires sustained attention over time, even when results are invisible. So how do you train focus? You start small. You set a timer. You remove distractions. You do the thing fully, wholly undisturbed, even for 10 minutes. You build that muscle. And over time, your mind learns, this is how we move now. This is how we think. This is how we complete. But it is not just about eliminating distractions. It is about asking better questions. What am I feeding my attention to? Who gets my mental energy, and have they earned it? Am I thinking about what serves me or just reacting to what shouts the loudest? These questions change everything, because once you see where your focus is going, you begin to take it back. You stop giving energy to opinions that do not pay your bills. You stop fighting battles that do not lead to progress. You stop letting every notification steal your presence. And you start choosing with intention, not once a week, every hour, every choice. Because focus is not something you set and forget. It is something you protect like the wealth that it is. Because make no mistake, your attention is wealth. Every successful business built by sustained focus, every meaningful relationship nurtured by intentional presence, every healed life transformed by focused thought, focused healing, focused action, and every version of you that you long to become, she is waiting on the other side of your undivided attention. So choose her, choose now, choose what builds, not what distracts, because the moment you reclaim your focus, you begin to control your world, not all at once, but one thought, 1 hour, one bold decision at a time. Chapter 8. Self-talk, the voice that builds or breaks you. There is a voice inside your head. It is with you when you win. It is with you when you fail. It speaks first when you wake and echoes last before you sleep. And that voice, more than your talent, your background, your goals, will determine the size of the life you allow yourself to live. Because before anyone doubts you, that voice decides whether you do. Before anyone believes in you, that voice decides whether you rise. Most people never question it. They think that is just how I think. But it is not. It is how you were trained to think. It is what you absorbed from parents who were afraid, teachers who did not see you, environments that only praised perfection. And now the voice sounds like you, but it is still running the script of someone else's fear. Until you rewrite it, it will sabotage every risk you try to take. It will downplay every win you fight to earn. It will whisper, "Who do you think you are? You are not ready. You are not enough. It will not last." This is not just negative thinking. This is internal betrayal. It is the quiet decay of your self-trust, word by word, thought by thought. But here is the truth. The successful learn. You do not need to silence the voice. You need to lead it. You need to train it. You need to speak back, because the strongest mind is not the one that never doubts. It is the one that refuses to agree with doubt. You say, "That is fear talking. I hear it, but I do not obey. That is my old self speaking. I honor her, but she does not run this house anymore." That is not the truth. The truth is, I am capable. I am learning. I am rising. This is not fake positivity. This is mental authority. Because the words you speak to yourself in private will eventually build the life you live in public. And if your inner dialogue is hostile, no outer success will ever feel safe. You will earn and question it. You will love and sabotage it. You will rise and fear the fall, because the voice inside you never learned how to hold success. That is why now in this chapter you take back the microphone. You become the narrator of your life, not the echo of old stories. You build a vocabulary of power. You build a tone of leadership. You speak to yourself like someone who is already who she said she would be. And slowly, everything shifts. Not because life gets easier, but because your inner voice no longer crumbles under pressure. It coaches you through it. It anchors you. It reminds you of what you chose when the world tries to pull you back into what you never asked for. This is how you become unstoppable. Not by ignoring fear, by walking with it while your inner voice says, "We are doing this anyway." So choose your language. Elevate your tone. Make your inner world a place where boldness is normal. Clarity is constant and failure is never final. Because the way you talk to yourself is not just habit. It is identity reinforcement. And when your identity is clear, consistent, and aligned with your vision, the world has no choice but to rise to match your belief in yourself. Chapter 9. Fear is fuel, if you learn to burn it right. Fear is not the enemy. Let that sink in. Fear is not weakness. Fear is not failure. Fear is a signal, a messenger, a powerful force that if left unchecked can control your life, but if harnessed can fuel your greatest evolution. The problem is not that you feel fear. The problem is what you do when it arrives. Most people run, they retreat, they overthink, they delay. They talk themselves out of the very leap that could change everything, because their mind has been trained to interpret fear as stop. But here is what the successful know. Fear does not mean stop, it means look closer. It means there is something here worth growing into. Fear rises at the edge of expansion. It shows up when you are about to do something bigger than your previous identity has allowed. It whispers not to protect you, but to preserve the version of you that is being left behind. So the question becomes, will I serve my fear? Or will I serve my future? You cannot do both. To serve your future, you must rewire your relationship with fear. You must stop asking, how do I get rid of it? And start asking, how do I walk with it? You must stop judging yourself for feeling it and start thanking it for pointing to where you still have untapped courage. Because fear, when viewed correctly, becomes a compass. Not one that always points to danger, but one that often points to the next level. The conversation you are scared to have, that is where your power grows. The price you are scared to charge, that is where your worth expands. The idea you are scared to launch, that is where your vision matures. Fear is not a stop sign. It is a spotlight. It illuminates the areas where your comfort zone has reached its edge. And that edge, that is where success is built. Not in safety. In the decision to move despite the shaking. Because every time you move with fear, not in fear, but with it you rewire your mind. You teach yourself, I can survive discomfort. I can breathe through pressure. I can lead through uncertainty. And with each repetition, the fear gets quieter. Not because it disappears, but because you are no longer listening to it as truth. You hear it. You honor it. And then you move from standard, not sensation. This is what self-controlled minds do. They do not argue with fear. They outgrow it. They build emotional capacity. They decide fear can ride in the car, but it does not touch the wheel. And over time, your tolerance for risk grows. Your tolerance for visibility, for rejection, for ambiguity, all of it grows. And when that happens, so does your life. Because the size of your world is directly linked to how much fear you are willing to feel without obedience. You do not need to be fearless. You need to be fear-trained. You need to feel it and still take the step. You need to let it shake and still speak the truth. You need to allow the uncertainty and still act from conviction. Because every time you do, you earn your own trust. And self-trust is the greatest currency in the world. With it, you become unstoppable, not because you are unafraid, but because you have learned how to use fear as fuel, not a chain. Chapter 9. Fear is fuel if you learn to burn it right. Fear is not the enemy. Let that sink in. Fear is not weakness. Fear is not failure. Fear is a signal, a messenger, a powerful force that if left unchecked can control your life, but if harnessed can fuel your greatest evolution. The problem is not that you feel fear. The problem is what you do when it arrives. Most people run, they retreat, they overthink, they delay, they talk themselves out of the very leap that could change everything, because their mind has been trained to interpret fear as stop. But here is what the successful know. Fear does not mean stop, it means look closer. It means there is something here worth growing into. Fear rises at the edge of expansion. It shows up when you are about to do something bigger than your previous identity has allowed. It whispers not to protect you, but to preserve the version of you that is being left behind. So the question becomes, will I serve my fear or will I serve my future? You cannot do both. To serve your future, you must rewire your relationship with fear. You must stop asking, how do I get rid of it, and start asking, how do I walk with it? You must stop judging yourself for feeling it and start thanking it for pointing to where you still have untapped courage. Because fear, when viewed correctly, becomes a compass. Not one that always points to danger, but one that often points to the next level. The conversation you are scared to have, that is where your power grows. The price you are scared to charge, that is where your worth expands. The idea you are scared to launch, that is where your vision matures. Fear is not a stop sign, it is a spotlight. It illuminates the areas where your comfort zone has reached its edge. And that edge, that is where success is built, not in safety, in the decision to move despite the shaking. Because every time you move with fear, not in fear, but with it, you rewire your mind. You teach yourself, I can survive discomfort. I can breathe through pressure. I can lead through uncertainty. And with each repetition, the fear gets quieter, not because it disappears, but because you are no longer listening to it as truth. You hear it, you honor it, and then you move from standard, not sensation. This is what self-controlled minds do. They do not argue with fear, they outgrow it. They build emotional capacity. They decide fear can ride in the car, but it does not touch the wheel. And over time, your tolerance for risk grows. Your tolerance for visibility, for rejection, for ambiguity, all of it grows. And when that happens, so does your life, because the size of your world is directly linked to how much fear you are willing to feel without obedience. You do not need to be fearless. You need to be fear-trained. You need to feel it and still take the step. You need to let it shake and still speak the truth. You need to allow the uncertainty and still act from conviction. Because every time you do, you earn your own trust. And self-trust is the greatest currency in the world. With it, you become unstoppable. Not because you are unafraid, but because you have learned how to use fear as fuel, not a chain. Chapter 11. Habits shape the mind more than motivation ever. Will motivation is overrated. It is inconsistent, emotional, fleeting. It rises with the sunrise and dies with the first inconvenience of the day. You cannot build an empire on a feeling, but you can build everything on a habit, because a habit is not emotional, it is not dramatic, it is a system, and systems are stronger than moods. They move you when your mind does not want to move. They train your thoughts while your emotions still catch up. They remind your body, this is who we are now, this is what we do. The problem is not that people lack dreams. It is that they refuse to build the habits that make those dreams inevitable. They want to think strong without training their thoughts daily. They want to believe deeply, but forget to repeat the action that strengthens belief. They want focus without the discipline of boundaries. They want confidence without the repetition that creates it. But the mind believes what you do most, not what you say you will do, not what you write down once, what you repeat. And what you repeat becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes identity. That is why the most powerful shift you can make is this: I am no longer here to rely on willpower. I am here to design a rhythm I do not need to escape from. That rhythm becomes your edge. It does not have to be massive, but it has to be real. It has to be something that happens when no one watches, when the mood is off, when the world is loud, when the fear creeps in. Because that is when the old you used to disappear. But now you have anchors. Now you have non-negotiables. Now you have habits that say, even when I do not feel strong, I show up like someone who is becoming unstoppable. These are not just routines. They are acts of self-leadership. They are reminders to your nervous system. We are safe in structure. They are reminders to your subconscious. We are building something bigger than the excuse trying to stop us. You want a controlled mind. You need controlled rhythms. You need to think of your habits not as boxes to check, but as proof to your brain that you are no longer who you used to be. Every rep, every journal entry, every walk without the phone, every email sent without delay, it all matters. Not because of what happens that day, but because of what it does to your belief about yourself. It is not about perfection. It is about presence, consistency, clarity and motion. And when you align your habits with your identity, your future becomes automatic. Not effortless, but inevitable. You wake up and no longer ask, "What should I do today?" You already know, because you have become someone who moves on principle, not on preference. That is the difference, and it is not built overnight, but it is built daily. One thought at a time, one act of follow-through at a time, until your life begins to rise, not because you changed everything once, but because you committed to the one thing over and over again. That is how the mind is truly controlled, through rhythm, through repetition, through relentless alignment. Chapter 12. Identity is the final frontier of control. There is a moment when changing your thoughts is not enough. A moment when habits are no longer hard, but they also are not transformative yet. A moment when you feel something rising in you that is deeper than motivation, stronger than willpower. That moment is not about effort. It is about identity. Because in the end, your mind will always submit to the identity you believe you are. Not the one you hope to be, not the one you post about, the one you live as, especially when no one is watching. Your identity is not a label, it is a pattern of being. It is built by repetition, reflection, and relentless choice. It is the unspoken agreement you have made with yourself about who you are, what you allow, what you expect, what you normalize. And until you raise that agreement, you will stay stuck, not because you are lazy, but because you are still loyal to an old definition of you. You will keep circling change like a visitor when you were always meant to become the architect, because the mind obeys what identity commands. If your identity says, "I am disciplined," your mind will choose structure over chaos. If your identity says, "I am powerful," your mind will default to courage over comfort. If your identity says, "I am the kind of person who shows up regardless of the odds," your mind will bend reality to match that truth. But if your identity says, "I am trying, I am fixing, I am recovering," then your mind will continue to protect your limitations in the name of honesty. And so the shift becomes urgent. You stop trying to change your life. You start becoming someone whose life is already different. You no longer say, "I want to think like a successful person." You say, "I am someone who has mastered their mind, and every action I take proves that now." This is not pretending. This is not faking it. This is deciding that the old you is no longer the authority, that you no longer take instructions from the version of you who settled, feared, doubted, delayed. that you now rise under a new rule. I lead myself like I have already arrived. And from that rule you think differently, you move differently, you speak with clarity, you act with precision, because the inner conflict is gone. You are not dragging two identities anymore. You are not building new behavior while clinging to an old name. You are not making brave choices while telling yourself you are still broken. You are aligned. And in alignment, energy multiplies. Clarity returns. Success accelerates. Because nothing is wasting energy in contradiction. You are not divided inside. You are one, whole, clear, unapologetic. And your life now becomes a reflection of that unity. You no longer ask, how do I become? You live from the truth, I already am, and I am choosing to act like it on purpose with no exit plan. That is the highest form of control, not domination, but embodiment. You no longer control your mind to feel safe. You control it because you know who you are now, and you refuse to go back. Clarify your standard and live there. No matter what, you have come far. You have peeled back layers. You have watched the old you unravel. You have rewritten thoughts, built new rhythms, held fear in your hands, and moved anyway. But now comes the real threshold. Now comes the moment where transformation becomes non-negotiable. Because change is not complete until it becomes standard, until your nervous system knows, this is how we live now. Not sometimes, not when we feel strong, always. This is the reset, not of goals, but of identity-backed standards, because everything in your life, your money, your peace, your health, your relationships, your energy, it all flows downward from your lowest standard, not what you aim for, what you allow. And if you do not reset what you allow, if you do not clarify the new minimum, you will slowly slip back. Not out of weakness, but out of familiarity. Because your mind is always returning to the known, unless you give it a new home to return to. That home must be built on clarity. This is what I now expect of myself no matter how I feel. This is how I now think no matter what my old story says. This is how I now move no matter who doubts me. You must define what is now beneath you, what behaviors, what habits, what excuses, what old dialogues in your head that once ran unchallenged, what spaces no longer feel aligned, what voices no longer belong in your atmosphere. Write them down, name them, draw the line, because until you draw the line, you will keep dancing on it. You will keep justifying what your future self would never accept. And every time you do, your mind loses trust in you. But every time you uphold the new standard, even when it costs you comfort, you earn back your own respect. You show yourself, I am no longer available for anything that dishonors the person I have decided to become. That is what shifts your frequency. That is what stabilizes your energy. That is what makes your growth irreversible. Because from now on, you do not change with the season. You live with standard, not suggestion. So ask yourself now fully and honestly, what do I no longer tolerate mentally, emotionally, spiritually? What becomes my new normal, not when it is convenient, but when it is hard? Who am I now when no one is watching? This is the reset. You are not becoming anymore. You have become. Now you must protect it with your choices, with your focus, with your inner dialogue, with your boundaries, with your stillness. Because the mind you now hold, it is the foundation for every result that follows. And your only job from here, live in full alignment with it. No exceptions, no shrinkage, no explanations, only clarity lived. The final decision from reaction to creation. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer searching. You are no longer entertaining the version of you who needed to be convinced. Because now you know your life is not a reflection of your potential. It is a reflection of your mental leadership. And that leadership, it is no longer optional. It is who you are. You do not rise by chance. You rise because you lead yourself thought by thought, moment by moment, decision by decision, long after the mood fades, long after the noise ends. You do not follow feelings anymore. You follow intention. You do not obey fear anymore. You build with focus. You do not seek external proof. You become the proof. Every time you wake up and choose alignment over anxiety, structure over story, purpose over panic, you are becoming undeniable. You are not fragile. You are not behind. You are not confused. You are no longer available for mental chaos masquerading as processing. You are no longer willing to relive an identity that delayed you. You are no longer asking, when will I feel ready? You are now declaring readiness is a choice and I choose now. That is the power you hold, the power to shape thought, to command attention, to discipline emotion, to reroute the reaction, to become someone who does not just think clearly, but who creates from clarity. Because that is what you are now, a creator, not a responder, not a reactor, a builder of reality, a shaper of identity, a holder of high standard, a protector of peace, a leader not of others, but of the one person who matters most. This is not motivation. This is responsibility. This is not hype. This is identity. This is not about feeling better. It is about becoming unstoppable. And now that you have the tools, the language, the map, you do not need permission. You only need to make the final decision. From this day forward, I lead my life from within. From this day forward, I master my mind, not as an idea, but as a way of being. From this day forward, I do not think like someone hoping, I think like someone who already knows. Because now you do know. You are the thinker, the director, the author, and you, no one else, have always held the pen. Now write your life like someone who never forgot who they truly are.